welcome to the STOA. Today's session is called the Homestead Incubator, a class for resilience and community with the one and only Ashley Colby. Ashley was the reluctant founder of Doomer Optimism, and that was a series here at the STOA, a really fire series that Ashley and Jason Snyder, who's here today as well, did. And they have started their own podcast and their own community from that, which is alive and well. And Ashley's launching a new course called the Homestead Incubator, which I'm quite excited about. And today's sort of like a launch of the course, or just talking about the course. And so Ashley will talk about that in a moment. And she kind of formally introduce herself. But if you have questions anytime, just put it in the chat. And when it gets to the Q&A portion, after Ashley presents, we will get to your questions. That being said, Ashley, welcome back to the STOA.
Thanks, Peter, for having me. Always really nice, and it's you've made such a nice space here at the STOA for sort of exploring the new, and I think that's basically what we're trying to do here. So I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna do a short ish presentation just to give people a little bit of background on who I am and how I got here. And then I think basically we'll just do a little back and forth with Peter and I. And then after that, some open questions for the group. So yes, I'm here to talk about my Homestead Incubator class today. My name is Ashley Colby. Basically, this talk is just going to be a little overview of my journey and how I got to making this class. And I think it's important in thinking about what's the purpose of the class and why am I thinking it's something people might want. So my background is in environmental sociology. I got my PhD in 2018. I specifically worked with people who did subsistence food production. So that means at least 50% of their own food growing or production, and this was in Chicago. So I have my head wrapped around this community who's succeeding at this task. After I got out of my PhD, or almost not even before I finished, I started Rizoma Fields in Uruguay, which I'll talk about. Became this reluctant founder of the Memeplex, as Jason calls it, Doomer Optimism. I'll talk a little bit about that. And it sort of led to the creation of this Homestead Incubator class, among other initiatives. So my scholarly research, like I said, was focused on people doing subsistence food production. And I was just trying to understand, like, why did they get into it? What does it mean to them? How does it work? And basically what I found is that a lot of people, just have a sense of uncertainty about the world or are actually failing to meet certain needs. For example, a lot of the people I studied in Chicago, they live in food deserts, they don't have access to food. So as a result, people are sort of turning to alternatives. And part of my larger theory of social change is that we're at this historical moment of crisis. Really we're in a period of time where the global empire is declining, and we're facing institutional failure, and then people are pursuing alternatives as a result of addressing these failures. What I found in my dissertation research is that I thought that people were going into subsistence food production as a sort of like individualized solution to what is like a social problem, but I surprisingly found that in the midst of doing getting into food production, people really found community, and I think that's really central, that insight to the way I think positive social change could play out in the future. So I just want to highlight that I talked to people who did food production, but I think there's all sorts of alternatives out there, not just food but transport and different ways of thinking about the built environment, ways to communicate, sort of money, crypto, parenting approaches to different economies entirely, and different approaches to education. So, I just want to highlight that there's other approaches that are not just food related, even though that's my expertise. So sort of in the midst of coming to grips with the fact that we're in like a moment of institutional decline, I decided to leave academia and sort of go my own way make this field school. So the field school is basically 3 parts. It's me and my husband and our 3 kids on our 9 acres in Uruguay, like experimenting ourselves, with things like solar water heaters and gray water gardens and compost toilet and all sorts of weird stuff. It is hosting students from the United States to learn about the alternatives that are happening here in Uruguay, and specifically agroecology, food agroecology farmers. The students work with them and sort of learn why they take this agroecological approach and what are the benefits of that. And then simultaneously, I'm continuing to do research, like sort of mapping what other alternatives are succeeding out there, or just what alternatives are out there, and are they failing? Are they, fake alternatives? And I have certain alternatives that I'm skeptical of, but continue to be sort of agnostic about making a judgment about. So, this process of just, figuring out who's doing what and, what's working, what's not. So then the pandemic hit and the student group stopped coming to Uruguay. And so I got onto Twitter as a way to just sort of connect with other people and share what I've been learning. And the channels I had been using up until that point just weren't very impactful. I've been interacting with a lot of, academics and environmental sociologists and other, environmental academics. And it just sort of, felt like a dead end, and it felt like a lot of people were not really open to these alternatives as or at least the ones that spoke to me the most, that felt the most exciting to me. So I started sharing about our homestead and my own local community and all the different alternatives I've been that appeal to me. And I found Jason, who's here, and Jason and I basically share this sort of, I think, underlying assessment of what is behind the biggest part of the crisis, which I think both of us, I don't want to speak for you, Jason, but energy is a big one. Just understanding just abundant energy and then declining cheap energy. And so we found each other and we just started riffing back and forth, and eventually I just sort of made this offhand comment like, what should we call ourselves? So let's call ourselves a doomer optimist or something stupid like that. And then it just, turned into a thing that we kind of playfully used the term, and then, just started leaning into it and saying, like, what is it? How would you define doomer optimists if who are these people? People who realize there's a crisis, but then, something to come as a result of it. So then Peter invited us to the STOA to do a series. We got big names like Vandana Shiva on, who's an activist, Indian activist in agroecology. And that was amazing. And then we sort of launched our own podcast and Substack. And the current part of the project that I'm really excited about, I'm inviting people to write these mini manifestos, where I have 7 parts so far. So it's like over 20 different little mini manifestos where people are mapping, like, what is their optimism? What is it that they think other people should be getting involved with and pursuing? And that's been really cool. And I think a lot of people have enjoyed that. So simultaneously as all this doomer optimism memeplex is playing out, I'm always thinking about, like, where are there points of agency in the world? Where can we like accelerate the most social change, and not in like a thoughtless way, but like using the or at least my sociological understanding about how these robust, subsistence food production networks work. How do I make more of that? How do I get people connected and start building community? So I realized that there's this sort of burgeoning homestead curious group on Twitter and in the world. People are just like, how do I even wrap my head around getting onto some land? What would that even entail? And then there's this other cohort of people who are not just thinkers, but practitioners who have experience doing it, but also think about it in the context of, like, global level crises. And I just thought, like, I'm a matchmaker. This is perfect. I'm going to put these people together. I'm going to get the people who have done it, who have lots of advice to share, to help the people who are trying to get up to speed on what what it is, what it would even mean, and or why to even do it. So we have some experts on things like complex systems and risk and localism, disaster preparedness, several different people experimenting with cooperative organizational structures in different contexts, but then people who have like real experience with livestock and water and energy and homeschooling, like all the practical things on this scale that's in general pretty foreign to most people in the developed world. So I just built this class to try to get people prepared to take next steps, but I think it's also important to point out at this point in the presentation that homesteading or getting onto some land is like a highly niche, or let's just say specific thing that's specific to the individual. There is no set of plans you could get that would work for like everybody. Certainly only work for like a very small subset, because when you're interacting with the land, it's basically you're interacting with like the climate and the culture and the geography and how much land you have and what the infrastructure is there and what your actual goals are, and do you have kids and how close to a school is it, and there's so many I think specific and individualized questions to be answered in the process of getting more resilient or self-sufficient, that I thought it's really important to get students exposure to that, be able to talk to specific experts or specific experienced practitioners on their specific issues and try to solve those issues that are specific to themselves, because you can read a bunch of different books, but only some of it is going to be relevant for your situation. So just briefly, the class structure is 12 weeks. It begins in January and ends in March, which is perfect for spring in the Northern Hemisphere. 2 synchronous classes per week. One class is going to be with like an expert level thinker on a topic and like a sort of more theoretical or intellectual discussion. And then the second class is going to be in small groups with an experienced homestead mentor. And I thought, basically I want to hack making people friends. So I want these small groups. I want people to sort of know about each other's circumstances and to sort of co-create in the small group, solving the problems of each other's journeys and figuring these things out. So, and then they'll have this relationship with this small group mentor. We're going to try to group people regionally to the extent possible. We have a few global students, but so then maybe they could go and meet each other, etc. But specifically, we have 9 subject areas, and we're asking students to make a plan for 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, and 100 years, as a way to force them to think like, what is my immediate next step? And then like, what is my biggest long-term goal for this place, this project, if I were to think about it. So these 9 subject areas here are, sort of land acquisition or land management, soil, shelter, security, energy, water, food, community, and health. My bigger picture goals, certainly I want to get students prepared to take the next steps at a speed faster than, the Homestead mentors have all told me, like, oh my gosh, I made so many mistakes. I wasted so much time. I really want to help people to not waste the time that I wasted doing things that I thought were the right way to go, but were not. But I also have a not so secret goal to sort of lift up practitioners, and especially homesteaders, small scale producers, as the experts that they are, because I think, well, at least my perspective is that if we have transition and energy, we're going to need people with like specific and robust hands-on skills. And these are the people who have those and have learned those skills. And everybody is also a person who lives in the modern world, so they can sort of translate those skills to people and who live in the modern context. And then I want to build out a network of people, like both at the level of the students, but also at the level of the instructors. I want sort of more cross-pollination, more cooperation in the context of this project, this class. We're all teaching together, and then it becomes an opportunity to get to know each other better and to see who gets along best and to let all those relationships bloom. But I think my bigger picture, and this is something I'd love to talk with other people about too, there's all these alternative education networks offerings that are coming about, and I'm wondering, basically more or less, like, how do we use the tools of the internet? This is just one idea I have, but how do we use the tools of the internet to sort of see the world, build the world we want to see in real life? Maybe this could be a launching pad for other retreats and other classes, in-person classes, sort of let's a craft retreat. Let's spend a weekend learning woodworking or something, everybody come to Virginia or whatever, somebody who has expertise in that. Apprenticeship networks. A lot of people have been talking about, like, we really need to link practitioners with people who want to learn these trades. Schooling initiatives, with people talking about different ways of building schools, alternative economies, these different cooperative models. There's lots of people experimenting with cooperatives, just to launch into these different opportunities. So I'm gonna pause there. We can turn it into more of a conversation now, but yeah, so thanks for listening to me go on.
Awesome. So feel free to start putting your questions in the chat. Colin, you can ask your questions to Ashley. I'll pepper over some questions right now. That maybe you can kind of like the ideal student for the course. I really love the Homestead Curious, so that disposition is there. But what's the level of like experience, knowledge you think a student should have, or anything else you think ideal student would have for this course?
Yeah, I built this as with the ideal student in mind, somebody who's far enough along the spectrum, the doomer spectrum, that they're convinced that it's something worth doing and interested or like already on the process of committing to it, even if that's in a city or something like that, but just like really actually interested in taking next steps. Because, if it's people who are just kind of like thinking or dabbling in the idea, I mean, I think it would probably be fine too, but as long as it's, we're not spending the whole class arguing about that it's something worthwhile. But I definitely don't think you need any level of expertise in any of the topics. The whole way I've curated the Homestead mentors and the expert level thinkers is to provide students with an overview, like it's like a survey of what perspectives exist out there. So it's not necessarily like, here is the way to homestead. It's like, here's Joe Norman's approach to it. Here's Jason Snyder's approach to it. Here's Chris Ellis's approach to it. Some of the things will overlap. Some of the things will be different. Take what appeals to you or applies to you and, bring it to your own set of circumstances, kind of thing. But it's not for people who have like significant expertise, because we're not going to be getting deep into the woods with any of this stuff. I'm hoping that eventually it turns into a network where we're like, we could actually, teach a class on, carpentry or, pigs or whatever, certain very specific niche things. But at this point, it's really just kind of laying the groundwork.
And so it's not just homesteading curious, it's like there's a commitment there as well, that are like a sense that you're going to commit to this way of being, this lifestyle.
Right.
And what is the cost of the course, just to get the practice?
It's $1,200, but we also have a sliding scale and scholarships. So if you want to take it, get in touch. We want to make it accessible to people. And
we were talking before we let people in about kind of a homestaying movement and the woofing and stuff like that. It's related to the apprenticeship. And I'm curious what your thoughts about that is, because that's what my wife and I are looking in, as we're like city people who are looking to get land, but we also want to get hands-on experience in addition to knowledge, potentially taking a course. So how do you see this course leading to something like that? And how do you see existing kind of things like the woofing movement related to it?
Yeah, so in general, I just sort of think we have a long way to go to become more resilient as individuals and communities and cultures. So I think of all of those things as complementary. I think there probably isn't a one right path about, do woofing first and then the homesteading class, or, I personally just think, I'm speaking for myself too, like, I've been doing this on our land for, 5 years now, and, more or less practicing, trying to get more resilient, thinking about my own food production. We had cattle at a certain point, we have chickens now, we are big into planting fruit and nut trees. I'm still such a baby in this process. It is just, I just want to, it's a long process. It's a journey. Even the people who are, some of the people who are guest lecturers or, experienced homesteaders are saying, there's still stuff I'm learning so much. So I just basically think pursue anything you have the time or bandwidth or interest to pursue. It's not going to hurt you. No one can take those skills away from you once you learn them. My own personal journey involved a lot of travel and working on organic farms as a way to sort of wrap my head around like what is happening on organic farms, what are the different approaches to it. And so I did things like WOOF, which stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. It's basically like a stay in advance, or in exchange for work, you get to stay and sometimes get fed as well. It's a lovely way to travel too. I stayed in Italy for some months, and just like Italian home cooked meals every day, that from the farm, that I'm helping to harvest and plant it, etc. That really helped me wrap my head around like, what are the different approaches and, why is this important kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, any and all of the above. There's a network in Chicago, and I know that these exist in other places too, like farms that host classes like beekeeping or preserving, or there's also in the United States, a network of extension, which is associated with the university. Every state has an extension network, and they often have classes like Master Gardener. So I think basically just, I personally advocate that everyone should have some of these skills. Part of what the homesteader mentors say is, don't drive yourself crazy trying to learn every single skill either. Find what interests you, get drawn to it and get into it. And, there's always some other community, some group of other weirdos out there who like the thing you like. And that's, part of the fun of it.
Cool. So we'll pivot to questions in a moment, but my last question for you, Ashley, is, it's like kind of like that movement from like being homesteading curious to be homesteading committed is it feels like knowledge. There's a lot of like ignorance out there. So I'm curious, like, what's the highest leverage thing that this course, like the highest leverage piece of knowledge or skill that this course is going to impart that can make that movement from someone to be just curious to be committed to this lifestyle?
Yeah, you know what? And even while you're saying that, it makes me like question what I just said about the homestead curious. Like, I think part of the big value add is that to understand what you're undertaking is the goal of the course. Like, what am I getting into here? What does it entail? People ask things like, how do I even purchase land? Like, what am I even looking for? This kind of thing where you have no heuristics to wrap your head around. Like, what would one be looking for if you wanted to get onto some land or some access to some land? I think so now that you said that, I think for me, when I first started getting onto some land, I didn't know what I didn't know, so I think for me, the big value add is to get people's head wrapped around like, what is an appropriate and smart first step or next step. I have a couple of students in the class who have land already. Like, what is an appropriate way to take next steps in a way that's productive and isn't going to send me backwards. I think a lot of people, they don't even really know how to wrap their heads around that. So I think, that's basically it. I think you start reading a homesteading book and it just all feels so overwhelming. Like, these are all just like skills, and there's all just like stuff here on this page, but I don't even know how to wrap my head around getting me, this person in the modern world, from who I am now to like doing any of those skills. So I think, to me, that's the key thing, to get people to feel confident, like they have enough information to take some steps in a direction that gets them to their specific goals.
Yeah, that feels right. Like in my position, like, with my wife living in the city, wanting to do this, purchase some land, like land acquisition, and kind of having a really tight criteria for that feels like the thing that's most alive, and I want to explore. So that's some what's alive on my end there. Let's pivot to some questions. We won't go in order, but we'll probably get everyone. Joel, you have a practical question about the course if you want to unmute yourself and ask it.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I'm very interested in checking this out. But yeah, you mentioned scholarships, and I was just wondering what the criteria for that would be to try to guarantee a place in such a class and such a network. And just a little quick background on me. I was invited by Daryl Dwayne. Shoot, can't remember his place in DC, but I've been interested in homesteading and eco-village curation for a long time, since college, learning all the environmental doomerism coming out of that and the depression, and realized I don't want to live that way. And so what can we do but create communities and resilience and decentralize and distribute? So I actually am building a network with my people, the hippies, and trying to piecemeal us together in different eco-village and homesteading groups to do something like this, to take a course that is worthwhile so that we can become educated quickly on these kind of topics and decision-making processes, and be connected with experts that can help us get on land, be profitable, and bring about the kind of culture that you're speaking of freedom and peace and harmony with multiple networks.
Yeah. So basically we're like just very, very open about the scholarship thing. It's just, contact us directly. We say, you tell us your situation, you tell us how much you can pay, and then we work it out. We also have been asking people to, if they want, barter some skill they have in exchange for the scholarship. So we have somebody who's a reporter who's going to put together a sort of nice piece at the end of the class describing, sort of how it all went and what are the takeaway things. We have somebody who was a teacher, so it's going to help with, pedagogical tools, this kind of thing. Yeah, and I think also on the topic of eco-villages and intentional communities, like we have a few people who think pretty deeply on that topic and have pretty different perspectives on it. And I think that's it's a very, very important topic. I think people's mind go to eco-villages pretty regularly, and there's a couple of people who have thought deeply about, like, what does the structure of that need to look like so that it succeeds. Lots of intentional communities fail, tons. And so you got to think about, Chris Mage, he wrote this book, A Small Farm Future. He's going to be a guest lecturer in the class. He has the approach that people should own their own pieces of land and sort of work together in like a loose, connected way, not a top-down cooperative way. Joel Hollingsworth is Untapped Growth. He's a guest lecturer. He's building like a cattle crypto cooperative, like literally, getting people with crypto money to buy into some land, and to basically buy cattle shares. And then that's Joel Hollingsworth. He's Untapped Growth on Twitter. And then there's another man, Sean Chamberlain. He's worked in the UK with things called transition towns and this thing called the Ecological Land Cooperative. He's a guest lecturer, and they've done a really good job, I think, hacking or addressing the issues related to getting onto some land for people who can't afford it. And transition towns are extremely successful model. But I think a lot of the devil's in the details, like the practical details. And I've talked a lot with people about, when people envision a co-op, sort of eco-village, they all envision themselves as the mayor, but none of them envision themselves as like the person who manages the sewers. So, you know, that's just I think it's just worth, you know, getting into more detail about like, how do you approach this practically in a way that isn't going to just fail from the outset? I think like definitely you would leave this course with like a set of perspectives around, you know, that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Jason Snyder, you had a share.
Yeah, this is not, I don't expect you to have an answer to this. I think this is something we've been thinking about for a while as a group, but this transition, so this is an online workshop, and I think it's good. It's building up these networks, but I think you would agree that eventually we'd want a component of this to transition towards in-person workshops where we're actually, you know, building a barn together or
Yes.
something. Do you want to talk a little bit? Do you have kind of like a master plan in your mind of like how this online and in person, these two kind of realms are gonna meet, or how you want them to meet?
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Tough one. No, I think that I do have an idea of how this would ideally play out, but I think also my specialty is reacting to the world as it is, as opposed to trying to muscle my vision onto things that people don't want. So, okay, so what I have in mind is, first of all, these in-person things already exist. Like I said, you know, there's Wolf, there's Master Gardener, there's, you know, there's all sorts of farms that offer these things. But what I think doesn't really exist is this sort of accelerating force for people who are pretty online, pretty city people, pretty white collar people, or whatever, you know, people who don't really, you know, maybe they don't feel confident walking into an extension office. You know, what am I doing here? What am I going to get out of this? And I think part of the vision for me in leaving it online at first and building the network online is to like let very online people dip their toe in and wrap their head around like what they need to do in real life. And I could say over and over again, like, just get off your computer and go outside. But like, nobody knows where to go outside until they know, you know, and are motivated to, you know. So I think like the answer to the online homestead, which somebody was just posting about this, like LOL online homestead class. Yes, LOL, this is the world we live in though. It is very funny that we like are doing stuff online that is totally in real life related topics, and physical material world related topics. You know, okay, so say we have this class and people start making friends. I hope that like people start doing regional meetups. There's a mentor in the class who's in the Northeast. He's in Vermont, Tristan Roberts. Even before the classes started, he's got a cover your ears if there are any vegans here. He's got a goat slaughtering day where he's inviting students from the class to come and learn with somebody who is his mentor, who has taught him how to process the goats. And he's like, this guy's so amazing, I shouldn't be the only person like getting this kind of hands-on knowledge. I'm of the opinion that that will happen pretty organically, those kinds of opportunities where people are like, yeah, I can do this. And you know, I think there's 3 couples who are going to this event, and that's even before the classes started, before anyone's like really gotten to know each other. And then, you know, eventually, you know, maybe it becomes, you know, that I think the least amount of top-down oversight is better. So maybe it becomes this loosely affiliated network of people who are like, you know, Sean Chamberlain is teaching a class that's called Surviving the Future. It's like, oh, it's more theoretical. Like maybe we're sort of connected with him, and then we're connected with, you know, these are all the different opportunities to learn hands-on things in real life. And we just start, you know, maybe one of the Homestead mentors says like, I want to teach cider making. and just we're cross-pollinating students, you know, that kind of thing. That to me would be the ideal way of it playing out. What do you have a counterpoint?
No, I thought that was a good answer.
Thanks, Jason. Let's go to Jeff D. You had a question or share.
Hey guys. Yeah, I just wanted to raise this question of on a kind of a different level. You know, everybody who moves somewhere new on some new land and wants to develop it, they're going to be coming from a different background. Obviously, some may already have experience with rural living or even farming, but a lot of them are going to be coming from completely different origins in cities and stuff. And just culturally, I just wanted to open that part of this up, because, you know, there's just so many different facets to that. And I think it's a big source of uncertainty when you make a move like this. It speaks to who you're going to be connected with when you get there. You're going to be able to make friends. Are people going to respond to you in an open and welcoming way, or are they going to feel like you're a threat and you're part of a gentrification process that's, you know, sort of destroying small town life, etc. And yeah, I was just curious to get people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can go, but I don't know if like Jason, you have anything to say on that, or anyone else. But this is the biggest and most wrought question of this whole process. And you know, basically I'm pretty convinced by Chris Mage's Small Farm Future, which he basically argues, like, you know, rural areas, especially in the developed world, just sort of emptied out over the course of the last, let's just say, 50 years, accelerated. And a lot of people just ended up in cities, and then, you know, very, very few people are involved in farming and on the land. So then that makes for a whole sort of culture, rural culture, that doesn't really have a robust, you know, small scale production. And, you know, almost like we've lost the skills and community, or the skills to build community in that context, you know, where there's a lot more people on the land, and trying, you know, they have to be cooperative in these kinds of communities. I really don't have anything to say besides to, like, quote Jason's tweet that it's localizing is going to be awkward, but we should do it anyways. It's just, you know, I think the way I approach it is I try to be extremely respectful of and uplifting local culture and people. I live in a place where people are extremely friendly. So that's a huge, you know, barrier for, I think, a lot of people who will probably be received with, you know, these attitudes like, you're gentrifying, who are you? You're an outsider. You're an urbanite. So I think, you know, to the extent possible, working together with local people, finding the things that they're interested in, purchasing things from local people, becoming even like informal apprentices for the few small scale farmers that exist. You know, can I come and help out for the day? I'd like to learn this. Like, that is a way in which you can, you know, become friendly with local people and learn skills and show that you're, like, respectful of their culture and skill set, and that, you know, you just become friendly with them by working together. I don't know, Jason, did you have anything to add to that? Otherwise, Joel.
Not too much. It is a very sticky issue, and we have, you know, we both have a mutual who is constantly posting about the horrible yuppies who are moving into his, you know, his neighborhood that his family has lived in for generations. And so we feel that. I think there are better and worse ways to do this process. One of the reasons why I kind of like the model of just moving out somewhere with the intention of being part of the productive economy in the region, you know, growing some of your own food, engaging with various activities of the community, getting involved with various social organizations. I think that's maybe a better model in this context than, say, trying to start a whole eco-village and just kind of moving in with your whole army, occupying a piece of land that other people, you know, had a relationship to, and basically just having an insular type of situation. And so I think it is gentrifying, but I think that it's still a good idea on net. But I think the way to kind of de-urbanize, if that's what we think is a good idea, it's to try and integrate with the culture, bring in new ideas, lift up the people who are already there, and not try to colonize. And that's a thin line. That's a very kind of fuzzy line. But I think just being aware that this is an issue and trying to mitigate the downside as much as possible, I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, and then I want to have Joel jump in if he wants, but I think on that point, you know, integrating, you got to integrate with people. You got to find some way to do it. You know, I think there is a tendency to be like, okay, I came from the city, so I'm going to find other people who came from the city and they're like me, so they understand this, and we're gonna all you know, make a school and only our kids are gonna go to that school, and you know, we're not really gonna, you know, you can understand why people do it. They want to be around people who like understand their, you know, orientation and their own specific issues. But yeah, I think trying your best to like make relationships and integrating is key. I think the whole process of localization is probably the story of, you know, our upcoming century. So Joel, did you have something you wanted to add?
I honestly just kind of wanted to echo what you guys were saying. Doing a lot of farm projects with farmers are some of the nicest people I've ever met. If if you're willing to listen and work with their values. And I really like what you said, Jason, because this is something that I've been looking at and struggling with as I look at land and just get experience that, yeah, I don't want to move in and invade an area, but I want to become part of it. I don't want to move in like cancer and grow to the point where it pushes out the wisdom that's been on that land for a long time. And even seeking wisdom that was kicked off that land from a previous time in our history. Through colonization and such. And in our second eco-village meeting group that I've set up, we actually had a little debacle about a name and a word and the power that can carry for certain people, and how important that is even just in this day and time, not to create divisiveness, but to adapt and integrate. And I had to take a humble look at myself, and because I don't care, but that's not my struggle. But I did have to realize, like, okay, I came off as a bit of a dick. Like, I need to humble myself and integrate a little bit better with my people even. So I just wanted to echo what you guys are saying too. It's my experience as well.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think part of, you know, I explicitly in this class am trying to build a kind of community that's like specifically I don't want to say safe space, that's not the right word, because that's not like how it's, you know, basically been used, but, you know, a place where we model the kind of communication and relationships we want to see more of. So you know, there are people even among the guest lecturers who do not get along with each other in this class in general, you know, not necessarily not get along, but they don't agree about the future, you know, or the approach. But to me, I'm one of the most important skills is, like, you know, it's what Peter's doing. It's finding a place to like discuss, you know, issues and to be able to be mature about it, and also to not I think police the boundaries. Like, we're in a period of time where there's like, you know, anything even more extreme or off the wall ideas or perspectives like should be given some opportunity to be discussed and debated, and sort of that discussion and debate, I think, are and being able to be friendly with one another in the midst of you know, it's awkward, it's high stakes, it's challenging, but that's the central skill to be able to navigate these things, in my opinion.
Did you have something to share, Jason? You're off mute.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't.
And Jeff, did you have any follow-up shares on that?
No, that was really good. I do want to I do want to echo that. I think it's a really key part of expanding the robustness of this sort of proto homesteader phase of a community is going to be with the the memetic mediation type of thing that Peter does. That I just think it's what little I've managed to absorb from what I've learned while taking classes here at the STOA and meeting people has gone a long way toward helping me to do what little integration I've done so far in my new environment here in Vermont. But I just think it would provide a lot of confidence to people on that psychological kind of emotional level. So yeah.
Rose, you had a question.
Hi. Yeah, so I was just wondering, you said you did research on subsistence farming in Chicago. So that, I mean, a lot of the conversation is about getting as far away from cities. It sounds like the lifeboat kind of model, but
Yeah.
Can you talk more about what people were doing in the city?
Yeah, so my dissertation research, I talked to people in the city, but also in the suburbs and in the rural outlying areas. And basically, there's so many cool things happening everywhere. And I think there's just, my sense is that there's a lot more robust and growing informal production of things and informal economies than people realize. So, in the rural areas, it's what you think, it's hunting and fishing and large gardens and chickens, et cetera. People are doing interesting things in the suburbs. Like, you can kind of do a lot on a suburban lot. I had some interviews with people with like a significant number of chickens in their suburban backyard, doing things with fruit trees. And there is a whole historical way in which people produce food on tiny amounts of land. They're not self-sufficient, but they're they have a lemon tree, and a lemon tree gives lots of lemons, and when it's productive. So I think that's just worth noting. Like, it's all just a scale, and anything you do is a good step in the right direction. Now, on the urban topic, I actually think, and I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't really talk about this that much because I think urban gardens and community gardens in urban areas get a lot of attention already. But like, the people who I interviewed were doing such amazing things on their tiny lots, and or in the case of Chicago, a lot of the city became sort of deindustrialized. And that means like there's whole sections of the city that have open lots or abandoned lots, or there's just space, and people think like, oh, it's a city, there's not a lot of space, but there actually is, and depending on the city, which I think probably there will be increasingly in the developed world, these kinds of abandoned spaces that can be used. The one example I'd like to highlight is this group. Young people met each other at the Occupy Wall Street movement, just kind of got fed up with trying to approach things from a political standpoint, like formal politics. And they took over or asked their local city council person to rent them access to this lot. It's an abandoned lot, pretty giant, former Sherwin-Williams paint factory. I think they rented it for like $1 a year or something like that. And it was in the southeast part of the city where there's like this little harbor, and they got people's boats that they were throwing out, filled the boats with soil, got things like, those concrete dividers that the people put on highways, the construction crews put on highways. They they got those that were like being thrown out, just basically like took in all the trash of like industrial civilization, and grew food out of it. And the one thing they got was the city of Chicago wood chips everybody's trees after Christmas, and they have like these giant piles of wood chips that they have, they just do like pay to compost at an industrial composting facility. But these people said like, can we get some of your wood chips? And they just got 2 truckloads of wood chips and then inoculated those with mushrooms, and that's a way to get toxins out of it's called mycoremediation, to get potential toxins out of the substrate, and that then turns the wood chips into soil, which they then grew food out of. Anyways, I just think that there's a lot of potential for being creative, being productive, and that's going back to what I said at the beginning. The process of becoming more productive in relationship with the land and the world is a sort of like iterative, experimental, creative, but also specific process to you and your life, and like the things that the resources you have, and the creativity you have, and the interest that you have, and the time that time as a resource. How much time do I have to commit to these things? So to me, really getting people to wrap their head around like there's so much possibility out there. It's really just a matter of finding something that like appeals to you, and then then I think arming people with the confidence of like, yes, I can do this. I think a lot of people, for example, before I got chickens, I just thought like, oh man, how am I going to wrap my head around like chickens, caring for chickens? Like, I don't know anything. I'm from the south side of Chicago. Like, and then I got them and I'm like, oh, it's not that hard. Like, I think a lot of people just realize a lot of this stuff is pretty simple once you learn it and have some exposure to it, and just wrap your head around what's involved, and then you just do it, and then you problem solve. And I think to empower people with this feeling of like, just get started, like, and feeling confident, like I can do this. I'm going to try this. I feel confident enough to at least take a first step. My husband got cattle for the first time. I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And then, you just have to have enough water for them to drink and make sure they don't get out of the fences. Like, that's literally it. If they're not dairy cows. So anyways, I think there's a lot of really, huge potential out there. And, just basically my whole goal is to empower people.
Any shares, Rose?
Yeah, no, that was a terrific answer. Thanks. I guess I was kind of wondering whether the people doing the stuff in the cities and the suburbs, whether that was sort of scaffolding for learning the skills, before buying land further out and doing, it on a bigger scale, or was it more, it's like, okay, now I'm growing food. Now I'm going to do this other thing, like scaffolding for expanding the creativity within the city.
Yeah, I think both. There was a contingent of people who were like, no, I'm committing to this city like level of production. They obviously like get limited then by space, and they can't expand beyond that. And then they just sort of focus their energies beyond that into like other creative realms, like these solidarity economies, gift economies. There's the people were doing so really cool things, like this one couple in this tiny city lot had like 5 or 6 different species of poultry, but they had too much manure because it's a tiny lot and too many animals, and so then they like traded the manure to a farmer in return for a CSA share of vegetables, this like urban rural connection. But then there were other people who were like, they basically started in the city, and then they were like, I love this too much. I want to do more of this. And it's a launching pad for getting into onto some land and like doing it more for real in their head. So yeah, both. And I personally think it's necessary for there to be both cohorts.
Awesome. Thanks, Rose. So maybe I'll ask a quick question at the end, but I'll share something first that's alive became alive listening to some of the shares. I recall Jason and I and a bunch of people jumped on a Zoom call just when COVID came online, I don't know if you remember this, Jason, this was like Colin Morris and everything. The naive days when everyone was hoarding toilet paper and we thought the world was going to end next week. And the conclusion that we came from that conversation was that we need both a meta tribe, these are the terms that came up at the time, a meta tribe and a kinetic tribe. And there's like different skill sets for both. There's a skill set to like find your people online, and there's a skill set to integrate with, you know, the people, your neighbors, and then get into the right relationship with both of those tribes. And the thing that I find so delicious and beautiful about Doomer Optimism, and this is why I want to take your course, Ashley, if I can manage the time, is that it's so complex. There's so much different dimensions, not just the practical know-how, but also the complexity understanding, the understanding of existential risk, the political dimension, you know, the spiritual dimension, the Memetic mediation piece. And so if anything can get into the right relationship between those tribes, I think the Doomer Optimism crew is figuring that out, or attempting to figure that out. And this is something that we need to figure out, which is quite beautiful. So I just wanted to share that. And I guess the question I could tease out from that is something about the manifesto that you mentioned that caught my attention, like the mini manifestos that people are developing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what is the manifesto if Doomer Optimism had a manifesto, your course had a manifesto, what would that be? And yeah, just anything that comes alive for you, anything I shared.
Yeah, I don't know, that like, I just like, Jason and I go back and forth where we like, we're like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like this, you know, Memetic mediation that we're doing is like so fun. And then when people ask us like what we actually think, both of us sometimes are like, I don't know, like we're not the gurus kind of thing. Like like, I don't want to tell people what to think. I want to, I guess, set, you know, okay, here's one way I could put it. You walk into a room, every time you walk into a room, that room has like a set of rules. Like you walk into a bank, there's a way to act in a bank. There's, you know, walk into you know, your child's bedroom, there's a way to act in that room. A classroom. So there's a way to act in a classroom. So I think for me, what I'm always on about is more or less like creating this space where the rules of the classroom is like be a grown-up and connect with others and share and like look at the abundance of ideas and creativity in the world. You know, just look at it, it's amazing, and we should just be lifting each other up. And I think that's also true with the Homestead Incubator. Just like, to me, I'm a fan of like the abundance and creativity of all these people. And I don't completely subscribe to, you know, untapped growth or Joe Norman, but everyone has something really beautiful to offer. And we're this, you know, individual person, and any individual person will be a complex set of so complex package. You know, they have complex set of beliefs, and also the way in which they share those, the way they relate, the psychological, the spiritual. And so for me, I guess I don't know, Jason, maybe you have something to add to this, but if there was any manifesto to me, it would be like, look at the beauty and abundance and diversity of all these smart and wonderful people who are, you know, who are doing the hard work of solving these problems and coming up with helpful and actionable like next steps and heuristics for the rest of us who are not as smart as them. Jason, do you have anything?
Only that I didn't feel the need to write one of these mini manifestos. I think, you know, we've talked a lot about these ideas, but I think the beauty of having these mini manifestos is that you have such a diverse range of views of what Doomer Optimism means to them and how they graft onto it. And some of them are a little bit contradictory. Like there was one manifesto where the guy was basically directly contradicting a previous manifesto from another guy and criticizing like a core, you know, kind of a core normal component of Doomer Optimism, and that's fine. And there was another guy online who was like, I have an anti-manifesto to the Doomer Optimists. And we're like, that should be a mini manifesto too, that's fine, right? Like we want to cultivate this complexity and have more kind of a more robust scene by allowing kind of contradictory ideas to bounce off of each other. And so that's, I think your answer, Ashley, is the same as mine, of just like, that's my manifesto, is look at the kind of beautiful ecology that can develop. We don't need to have gurus, or, you know, we've put forth our ideas in many different platforms, and that's fine. So we don't need to keep hammering kind of like, this is the, you know, this is the way, this, you know, these are just our ideas, and it might have gotten things started, but let's now branch out into something beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and I would just to like reiterate, the thing that we are I think both willing to say out loud is like, more or less like, let's be grown-ups here, you know. And I think like, let's cultivate a healthy kind of social environment where, where there was an interaction a while back where people were sharing their what some bot decided whether or not they read left-wing or right-wing news, and it was just like, you know, going back and forth about like, yeah, you're left-wing, you're right-wing. And I think just being able to, I don't know, be in community with other people, fight with them a little bit, even sometimes like it's okay to like disagree and be annoyed. You know, that doesn't mean the end of your relationship. Every relationship has that. And then, you know, to come back together and be able to laugh together, I think is central to it. So I think I'm really hoping to cultivate that kind of atmosphere in the class. It will be my first time trying to do that with, you know, all different people, some of whom I don't know well. So I hope you all will wish me luck, and or if you join us, help me. But yeah, that's basically it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, there's something quite like awesome about having a appreciation for an ecology of different philosophies, and then each philosophy has an ecology of different like emotional constellation with them. And then like if you can create like what we're doing at the Stoa and Doomer Optimism, like this virtual town hall that has the right enabling constraints that allows for that appreciation, that dialogue to flourish, and then the cross-pollination, I think that is what's needed right now to deal with the complexity that we're in. So yeah, big supporter of you, Ashley, and then you, Jason, and the whole Doomer Optimism movement. I'll be at the course if I can make it. And anything, parting words you'd like to leave us with, perhaps like, you know, the website or anything where people can sign up?
Yeah. Yeah, so the class is basically the way to get to sign up is to go to my Twitter account and click on the link in my bio, and you'll see Homestead Incubator. You know, basically we're specifically approaching this as the same way we, you know, I have approached homesteading in general is experimental and iterative. So we're just throwing this class out there. We're going to see how it goes. So that means it's not you know, solidified into like one set website or anything like that yet. It's just a Google form as we, you know, basically figure out what this is by doing it. And so, yes, go to my Twitter. It is at Rizoma School, RIZOMA School. And you can find more information there about, you know, Doomer Optimism and Homestead Incubator and all sorts of different projects that I can't seem to stop making.
Can you put your Twitter in the chat?
Yes, I'll do it right now.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome. And I'll put, for those listening on YouTube, I'll put all that information on the video description. So that being said, check out Ashley and the school. You can check out the Stoa for future events at thestoa.ca. We've got one on pop magic tomorrow, so if you want to cast some spells in certain directions, feel free to sign up for that. Yeah, so everyone, thanks so much for coming to Stoa today.
Thanks, Peter, for having me. Thanks, Jason, for your input.